Does the ANC support war crimes? The evidence I'm about to show you is chilling. So the ANC's friendship with the likes of Iran comes as little surprise to those of us who follow current affairs. But what people may not realize is that while there's a lot of skepticism directed at Israel, a lot of people, including the ANC, seem hell-bent on telling Israel to comply with international law. Israel needs to show restraint. Israel's committing atrocities. The reality is that the Iranian regime, one of the ANC's best friends, is happily committing war crimes of its own. And so this begs the question, does the ANC support war crimes? Now, before we get into this, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? It's completely free and all you have to do is click on the subscribe button below the video. If you would like to support the channel and enjoy some additional benefits, you can do so by clicking the join button below and becoming a Power Club member. Now let's get started. So before we discuss the possible war crimes in and of themselves, it's important to establish just how the ANC continues to support Iran up until this day, even after everything that happened. Now, here we have a press release from the DIRCO minister, Ronald Lamola, saying, following extensive consultations with several of my counterparts in Gulf nations currently impacted by the prevailing instability in the Middle East, I held a substantive discussion with Iranian Foreign Minister, His Excellency Abbas Araghchi. Now, what I would like to know is, have you bothered reaching out to the Israelis and the Americans as well? There's no evidence to suggest this. Continuing, in our exchange, I expressed our profound concern regarding the escalating loss of civilian life and the worsening humanitarian situation in the region. We reaffirmed our call for an immediate de-escalation of hostilities. South Africa remains steadfast in its position that the only viable path forward is through diplomatic engagement and a commitment to a peaceful, just and lasting resolution to the conflict in accordance with international law. Scrolling down, we see this graphic of Araghchi and Lamola, and as you can see, the South African and Iranian flags are both together, so they really are implying that these are their friends. Now, what's particularly concerning to me is how they speak about the humanitarian situation and complying with international law. Yet, throughout their friendship with Iran, the ANC has not once condemned any of Iran's potential war crimes. And I'm about to show you a video that all but confirms that the Iranian regime are committing war crimes against Israel. So here we have a video from a few days ago explaining how Iran launched an apparent cluster warhead missile towards central Israel. Although no injuries were reported at the time. Let's have a watch. So for those who might not know, a cluster warhead is different to the ballistic missiles and other rockets that we see in that the warhead itself splits into multiple projectiles as it descends. And so this is a very dangerous kind of weapon because ultimately those projectiles that it splits into can cover a massive radius. And so it really is a form of indiscriminate bombing. And so when people criticize Israel for indiscriminate bombing, I'd like to see them talk about these cluster munitions being used by Iran, because this is quite literally the definition of indiscriminate. So here we have an article from the IDF themselves confirming not only that these kinds of missiles have killed civilians, but also why this is a war crime. Now, of course, some people might say, oh, the IDF is biased, but what you will see is that they provide proper factual backing for their argument. So first of all, I'd like to point out that, as I previously explained, the cluster missiles launched by the Iranian regime can open at an altitude of approximately 7 to 10 kilometers above the ground. Once it opens, dozens of smaller explosives are scattered across the sky before eventually falling toward the ground in a range that regularly reaches several kilometers. Each missile equipped with such a warhead can carry roughly 20 to 24 sub-munitions, and in some types of Iran's missiles, several dozens of sub-munitions, each weighing several kilograms. So here it explains that during one of the attacks on Monday, March the 9th, an Iranian cluster missile was fired at a densely populated area in central Israel. For those of you who do know Israel or are familiar, the central Israel region is pretty much covered with densely populated urban centers. And so this makes complete sense. After the missile opened in midair, dozens of smaller explosive sub-munitions spread across a large area and fell into multiple densely populated cities. The munitions hit at least 6 different locations with a range of kilometers across central Israel, including the cities of Yehud or Yehuda, Holon, and Bat Yam. So it explains here that the explosions caused significant damage to the residential neighborhoods, but I want to highlight here that tragically, the attack resulted in 2 civilian deaths with additional civilians injured. Now here's just the damage from one of the missiles that fell. We then see how in a more recent attack, the Iranian cluster missile was launched and dispersed over central Israel. In Ramat Gan, which is right next to Tel Aviv, a couple aged around 70 were killed whilst on their way to a shelter, whilst train stations in both Holon and Tel Aviv were significantly damaged and additional civilians injured. And this is the apartment of the couple who were tragically killed. As you can see, massive damage. I mean, the entire place has been completely obliterated. Beyond the immediate destruction, the danger does not end when the attack is over. Once a missile's warhead opens and disperses these explosives, they are extremely difficult to intercept. Even if missile defense systems detect the original missile, the dozens of smaller sub-munitions that scatter afterward are far harder to stop individually. This means that large areas can be affected simultaneously. And that's obviously important to note because it makes intercepting them through Israel's defenses that much harder. So a part of this that I want to actually highlight is why this constitutes a war crime. Now, as the IDF very carefully outlines, the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions bans cluster munitions for states that are party to it. Now, neither Israel nor Iran are a party to the Convention on Cluster Munitions, meaning that they are not categorically banned from using these cluster munitions. But even states that are not party to the convention must still comply with the laws of armed conflict, including the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precautions in attack. Now, of course, this is not being done here when these cluster munitions are fired. You see, they may not be party to the CCM, but you still have to abide by the laws of armed conflict. If you are interested in finding more about them, I know that the International Committee of the Red Cross do have quite a big booklet explaining them, but basically all countries are expected to follow these rules. And ultimately, as explained here, distinction, proportionality, and precautions need to be exacted, and these are not being followed when a cluster munition is fired, especially when you see how it bursts into dozens of individual warheads going off all sorts of directions over kilometers of land. It's just completely indiscriminate. But there is something else apart from this that I also want to highlight. So in addition to the ANC support of Iran, they've also been fans of members of Iran's greater axis of resistance, which includes proxies such as Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And here we actually have evidence of stockpiles of weapons and munitions found by the IDF inside a school in southern Lebanon, which displays the UN Human Rights Council signage. And this is very important because we often hear about how these different terror groups are basically disguising themselves. Some of them dress up in their press jackets and helmets as journalists. Others pretend to be teachers. Some of them actually are teachers. And there were actually a whole bunch who were part of Al Jazeera and even the United Nations, who were subsequently fired because it was found that they had ties to Hamas and other groups. But let's take a look at this video and you can see just how shocking the betrayal actually is. I mean, there we have RPGs and missile launchers. This is heavy machinery. More missiles. There we've got the UNHCR signage, grenades. So there you have it. There's just this continued use of, firstly, civilian infrastructure and using human beings and civilians as human shields. And there's also the fact that you have the likes of Iran committing literal war crimes by dropping these cluster bombs. And so ultimately my question is this. If the ANC is so quick to point fingers at Israel, shouldn't the rest of us be pointing fingers at the ANC? They complain that Israel's committing war crimes, but from where I'm standing, it's the ANC's allies who are committing war crimes. And so I wonder, should somebody not start taking action against the likes of Iran and against the ANC's allies who are so quick to talk about international law? Interesting, to say the least. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.